In today's video, we're going to be looking at how to build a sales assistant by integrating an agent with some Salesforce tools. Now, if you're building agents or co-pilots for your company, this is a pretty way to put it together. And I'll be showing you how to deploy this agent as a Slack agent as well, which would be a really good way to deploy it into your organization. I'm going to be using Salesforce as an example, but the same concepts can be applied to other sales tools like HubSpot and different other applications. So I'm going to be looking at a few examples of how our sales agent is actually going to work. The very first one is that we're going to be using it to search the Salesforce Knowledgebase. So if you are familiar with Salesforce, you would know that Salesforce does have a knowledge base which can be populated with articles. And what we're going to be doing essentially is that we're going to be using Slack to interact with this knowledge base. So I'm just going to go into my Slack and I'm going to ask a very, very simple question. I'm going to say, what discount can I offer for our Gen Watts diesel generator? So what's going to happen here is that this agent is going to interact with the Salesforce knowledge base. It's going to search through it. It's going to find that answer, and it's going to pull it back as a response, which we're going to get right inside Slack. So as you can see, it pulled out the information. So it says that, here is the summary of the discount policy for Gen Watts, the diesel generator. It gave us the policy. It gave us the volume discounts, orders over $10,000, and so on and so forth. And all of this is coming from this knowledge article, which it is sourcing right here. So if we click into this, you would see where it's pulling all of that information from. It's pulling it from this knowledge base, which is around offering discounts to clients. So this is a very, very powerful way to put to kind of do some kind of RAG around your Salesforce knowledge base, and I'll be showing you exactly how you can do that. All right, so next thing I'm going to be running is doing some research. I want to do some research on my account. I want to pull some information about my account. I want to know what's going on in a particular account. And I'm just going to run this particular query. I want to run down of Burlington Textiles. I want to see what's going on in that account. And we just want to see, what's going on there, what cases are there, what opportunities are there, who's the contact person for this particular account. And as you can see, it's gone to that particular record. It's pulled up the information. It's saying that here are the opportunities that are there. There's one opportunity which is closed one. There's a contact over here who's called Jack Rogers, and then under cases you see that there are a few cases that are actually open here for this particular account. So again, it's going behind the scenes in Salesforce, it's pulling that information. Now this is something that I really am excited about as well, is that it's not just about pulling information or doing some kind of retrieval, it's also about taking some kind of action. So let's say I want to create a ticket in Salesforce, and I just want to do that completely just through text, and I might say something like, I would like to reserve a meeting room for March 15th for a client on the I would also love to reserve some food and drinks. Okay, so again, what is going to happen right here is that this particular command is going to essentially go into Salesforce and create a case record. And it's doing this, and as you can see here, the request to reserve a meeting for March 15th along with food and drinks has been successfully submitted. You can track the progress of your case through this case link. So let's go into Salesforce and look at the cases. Again, we saw our case has been created. So it says meeting room catering reservation for March 15th. It has created that case record, and when we look at description, it says that the user would like to reserve a meeting room for March 15th for a client meeting. Additionally, the user requests foods and drinks to be reserved for the meeting. Now, this is so powerful. If you can think about it, like I can create a case record without, or raise a ticket without necessarily coming into Salesforce and typing on each single field and filling out the form, because people want to do things more conversational. So I'm going to show you how to build this very, very quickly. Now, I've written the entire code out, so I'm going to be sharing the code via GitHub, of course, but I'm just going to walk you through the broad steps of how to get this working. So actually, if you can go into my VS Code here, I usually create a virtual environment, so I encourage you to do that. And basically, you need to run this command. I'm going to put it on the screen as well. And the command just simply is, you do a pip install LangChain CLI to install the LangChain CLI, and then you do a LangChain app new and you put your app name, and that's it. And once you do it, it spins up the entire sort of boilerplate code that you need. But in addition to that, some of the things that we've also done is to install a package called Simple Salesforce. Simple Salesforce is a Python package that makes it easy for you to interact with your Salesforce data. So those are the things that we need to do. So let's walk through some of the imports here. Some of the standard ones are going to be some of the pedantic stuff, the typing, fast API, obviously, which is what LangServe uses to serve up the application. You can see the LangServe add routes, which basically is an abstraction of adding the routes as well. I'm using python.env to load my environment variables as well. And we're going to be bringing in the langchain.tools tool because we're going to be using tools. And then, like I said, simple Salesforce, we're importing the Salesforce clients, which we're going to be using to interact with Salesforce. Now, again, you can go get a developer edition. Salesforce is free to get. You can use it to test it out. All you really need from an environment point of view, variable point of view, is a Salesforce username, a Salesforce password, and a Salesforce security token. So to get your Salesforce security token, you go into Salesforce, go to your view profile, go to settings, and right in there, you're going to see your reset my security token. So if you hit this button, they're going to send you your security token, and you're going to be able to use your security token moving forward. Okay, so the next thing I'm also using is obviously an OpenAI API key. I set up a Slack app, again, setting up a Slack app just to use the app function for Slack. I have a lot of video on building Slack applications. I'm going to throw one of them in the description so you can use it to build out your Slack application. But from your Slack application, all you really need is your Slack bot token and your Slack sign-in secret. Now, I have defined the Slack application in a manifest file, which I have added in this package as well. So it includes the things that you need. Really, the most important thing you need here is a chat right in terms of your OAuth scopes. And I've also basically made it possible for you to kind of have an events description. Now, if you kind of set up your Salesforce, you want to throw in your server URL here. So your server URL, if you deploy, you can use it. I also use ngrok. So basically, I use ngrok to expose a server URL, which I put into my events description, because this is required if you're going to be using this mode. Now, if you don't want to use the server URL, if you don't want to use if you don't want to use ngrok to expose a server URL, you can feel free to use socket mode as well. So just basically set socket mode to true, and you would just need to pass in your app token. I have so many videos on this, so I'm going to put some of these videos in the description so that you can look through it. Okay, so let's go back to our server.py app and just go through some of the other things that we need here. Like I said, you need your agent executor, because that's what's going to be running our agent. You're going to need the scratchpad. You're going to need sort of the format to OpenAI functions, because basically what we're doing is taking our tools and formatting it into OpenAI functions, because we're using OpenAI, and we're using the OpenAI agent output parser. We're bringing our model we're using is Chat OpenAI, and we're bringing in a chat prompt template as well as the format tool to OpenAI function as well. And I have a Slack package right here, which I'll be showing you very, very shortly. I'm just importing that right here. So again, we set up our environment variables, make sure that we have all the login credentials for Salesforce. So we have a Salesforce username, the password, the security token. You have an instance and an instance URL. These are things that you really need. You just simply need to set up your Salesforce. So here we instantiate our Salesforce client. And basically, we're just passing our Salesforce instance, and we're passing in a Salesforce username, password, and our token, and that creates our Salesforce client. Now, for Fast API, we're just going to instantiate it by setting it to app. And the very first thing you're doing with your agent typically is you're creating a prompt, right? So we're creating a prompt. So we're using the chat prompt template, and we're going to set a system prompt. Now, a system prompt is pretty simple. Your helpful assistant that searches Salesforce knowledge articles. You'll use tools only if necessary to best answer the user's questions. Then it says return the response in Slack Markdown. Now, this is very important because we're using Slack. We want to return the response back in Slack Markdown to make sure it is well formatted. Now, you can also, use Slack Block Kit if you want to make it much easier for yourself as well. And here we can see, just giving us an example of what Slack Markdown is. Now, what I noticed with the OpenAI function, OpenAI model, is that when I tell it to return information back in Slack Markdown, sometimes it just returns it in plain Markdown, which are two different things. For instance, bold is double star. In normal Markdown, in Slack Markdown is just one star, and this is italic. So I'm just giving it a few examples so it kind of gets a sense of what I am looking for, so it doesn't just sort of go off the rails. Now, in terms of your inputs, we're just placing an inputs right here, and then obviously you always have to pass in your agent scratchpad. Now for the model, I'm just using GPT 40125 preview. Of course, you can also use GPT 3.5 or any model that supports calling functions. That is what we're using here. And now we're going to go ahead and set up our tools. So the very first tool we have here is Search Salesforce Knowledge. And this tool basically takes a query and then it runs a SOSL query. What is a SOSL query? SOSL query is Salesforce's search tool, which basically searches Salesforce. So there are two ways to interact with data in Salesforce. You can either use SOSL or SOQL. SOSL is for searching and SOQL is for querying. SOSL is usually when you don't have like a good idea of the data, and that makes sense, especially because people can type in different information. So even if it is close to the query that they're asking for, they're going to get a response back, and that's what we're using here. So basically, the parameters we're passing in is a query. So this is a keyword or a phrase that we're using to search Salesforce. And then we're returning a formatted string that includes the title of the article that we found, the question of the article, and the URL found as well. I'm also adding the answer as well. So to do this is a pretty simple thing. If you have a simple Salesforce implemented, it is truly simple. So we have a search string. We're defining it right here. So this is how you search in SOSL. So you do a find and you put this. This is just because we have to format this as a string. So the way you use simple Salesforce is that you have to kind of pass your query in curly braces. So we're using this to sort of represent that, and we're saying find in all fields, returning knowledge KAV. So this is sort of your knowledge object in Salesforce, and we're returning the ID, the title, a question, an answer, and then the URL. And of course, we're formatting the query just to make sure that it is properly represented here. Now, the next thing we're doing is just basically using that search string to search. So we use our sf.search to search Salesforce. When we return information, then we're going to just basically clean up the data that we return. So for every article we get, we want to pull the ID, we want to pull the URL, we want to pull the details, and want to sort of pull it all together in something that looks like a document, so that when we're passing it back to the LLM, it is clean information. So we're joining all of these things into a list. So you're typically returning a list when you do a search, right? You're going to return a list of related articles, and basically it's going to pass those related articles to the LLM when this tool is run. So that's the first tool we're running right here. The next tool we're running is searching Salesforce opportunities. Once again, we're using SOSL. You provide a query, very, very similar to what we're doing above, but this is just specifically for opportunities. And again, you can do all of this for accounts. You can do it for contacts. You can do it for custom objects, whatever it is that you're trying to search. And you can do it for cross-object type stuff as well. So it's really easy for you to put all of these together. Now, the next one is creating a Salesforce case. So that was the one that created our Salesforce case ticket. So again, we're passing a subject and a description. So that's all we're passing here. Now, of course, depending on how you set up your case, workflow in Salesforce, you might want to pass more parameters in, but for us, we're just going with subject and description. And then we're just going to return some kind of confirmation message that indicates that the case was created successfully. And we're also returning back some kind of URL. So again, for the case details, we're passing a subject, description. I'm hard coding my origin to web because origin is a required value. So if you might want to set this to whatever you want as well. And then we're just going to basically creating a new case. We're going to extract the case ID from the case that we create. And then we're going to construct a link back so that when the case is created, we can get that link back and pass it back to the user. Once the case is successfully created, we pass that, and we pass the case link back to the LLM. Finally, we have our search account summary. Now, this is doing something a little bit more complicated. It has a few steps associated with it. So very first one is essentially doing a search based on a particular account name. So we provide an account name, it's doing a search. Now, Salesforce has this thing called like the like operator, where you can just basically pass in account information or account name that looks similar. So we're using this to basically say, whenever someone says, oh, give me a rundown, when we run that query, give me a rundown of Burlington Textile, basically we're just passing in the Salesforce name, which might look like a Salesforce name, and then it pulls back the information. Now, when it pulls back the information, we're extracting the account ID from the information it pulls back, and we're using that account ID to run queries for opportunities, contacts, and cases related to the accounts that we just pulled from. Now, once we do all of that, we're going to structure everything into a nice sort of summary. And all of that summary is what we're passing back to the LLM. So you can see the pattern here. We run a query, we organize it, we kind of put it together, and we pass it back to the LLM, and the LLM can then use that information to solve the problems. Now, as you can see here, we're now going to instantiate our tools. We created, was it 1, 2, 3 tools or 4 tools? So we pass these tools into a list, and then we use a bind method with the LLM to bind the functions, right, tools to OpenAI functions, because remember, we're using OpenAI, so we're using OpenAI functions. So what this does basically is that it takes the tools that we've created, these functions we've created, it converts it into an OpenAI function. So basically, it's going to loop through all the tools that we've created and create that function. Now, we're basically going to now create our agent. We're using LangChain expression language right here to create our agent, and basically we're providing some kind of input, our scratchpad, and some intermediate steps, and then we're providing like the prompts, and we're dividing this by pipes. So prompts, the LLM with the tools, and then our agent output passer, which is just basically going to generate our outputs. Now, we're going to be running our agent using an agent executor as usual. So with an agent executor, you're passing your agent, which is all of this, and you're also passing your tools. So your agent executor is going to be responsible for determining which tools to run. It's going to run them, get their outputs, and pull it back to your agent, and your agent is going to be able to put the output out. So that's essentially what we're doing here for the most part. The rest is just basically a boilerplate code that comes with LangServe. So this basically redirects your root directory to the docs page, and then we're putting some pedantic stuff here just to make sure that we have our input and our output clearly defined. And finally, we are now using the add routes method, which is coming from LangServe. So basically it's a fast API wrapper that just creates a route, and we're passing the app, so the fast API app, and we're passing our agent executor and passing in inputs that is coming from the user, output with config, and the run name here is agent, and that's it. We just have our route added. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about Slack in a bit, because we're just creating a quick route for Slack. Typically, if you create a route for Slack, you have Slack events, and in the Slack events, you typically want to just get Slack to pass a challenge, a URL verification challenge. This challenge just basically allows you to set the URL that is coming from your server in Slack when you're creating your Slack application. And that's pretty much it. That's our server. And that's basically, all you really need to run, to kind of get this running. Now, on the Slack side, we have this Slack underscore bolt, the PY file right here. And basically what this contains is just our Slack setup. It's a pretty straightforward one. We're using Slack Bolt. Slack Bolt is pretty easy to use. Now, the cool thing about using Fast API is that Slack Bolt also has an adapter for Fast API. So we can have our request handler for Slack for Fast API right here. So you can pull that request handler, because that's just basically all that's going to be handling all the events that Slack is sending us, that is sending to our server. And we have our Slack Bolt app as well, which is just basically controlling all the app methods we're going to be using. And then we're using LangServe Remote Runnable. So LangServe allows you to do two things, right? It allows you to set the server, which we already have done, but also allows you to consume from the server using a client. And Remote Runnable is a way to kind of use the whatever server you've already built out. Remote Runnable is basically the client consuming that server. So the first thing we do here is to basically instantiate our Slack app. So we're going to pass our Slack token, so our Slack bot token, which I showed you earlier on, our signing secrets, and that basically instantiates our Slack app. Next up, we're going to now instantiate the Remote Runnable, and basically all you really need to do is to pass your local host 8000 here / and that's basically it. And that's all you really need to do to really use this particular the agent that we just created inside Slack. So the very first thing we're doing here is to fetch the response here. So basically, whenever someone puts a query through, we get a result back using this fetch response function. So we're defining this function because we're going to be using it quite a lot in handling messages that are coming back. So the very first method, event we're handling here is a message handler, and just a message handler basically takes in a message from Slack. So whenever someone sends a message, so in this case we're doing like an IM message, so that's a direct message. So whenever someone directly messages our app or bot, if you want to call it, basically we're gonna get the channel. So the message contains like the entire message event, and from that message event we're getting the channel, we're getting the timestamp because we want to thread our responses back, and then we're getting a query, we're getting our text, which is basically going to be our query. So once we get that information, basically the first thing you want to do, and now this is the interesting thing about Slack, and because Slack does not necessarily support streaming text back, so you want to make sure from a user experience point of view, you want to make sure that when someone sends a message to your agent, that you're acknowledging that message by saying that, okay, look, I'm going to go and do some search on this particular message. So you're saying, okay, let me go search for the result, or let me go search for let me go do the operation that you've told me to do. And so to do that, we're using the client underscore chat. We're using client.chat underscore post message, which basically accepts the channel ID, which we've extracted from our message event. The text we're sending back is just a magnifying glass and saying searching. And then because we want to thread the response, always cleaner to thread your responses when you're working with Slack. So we do a thread underscore TS, and we're passing in our thread, our timestamp. So the message timestamp shows that you're going to be threading that message as a response back there. All right, so that's the first thing we do. Then we basically run our Remote Runnable. So we basically fetch the response back. We pass that query to the response. And once we get an output text back, basically if you kind of see the output inside Fast API. See if I can find the Fast API running right here. Let's see if it's running. Okay, so this is right, like tell me about discounts. So hopefully this is just going to go pull some stuff about discounts. Now, when the output comes back, it comes back as a dictionary containing a bunch of things. So you want to parse that. That's why we're doing that. So I just want to just show you real quickly right here how you can take a look at it. Okay, so our response came back, right? So this is an output. So you can see output. And inside output, you see another sort of field output, and then you have callback events and metadata and all of that stuff. So from our application, we're extracting output. So we're doing response and extracting output. Now, what we want to do is to go ahead and update that initial message that we sent because we're no longer searching at this point, right? We've moved away from the searching state and we have provided a response. So basically, we're using the client.chat_update to update that message that we just sent. So we set the channel to channel ID. We set the timestamp to thread TS, so the same thread TS that we had set up for the result. When we set up that initial message, we captured the timestamp for it, or the thread TS for it, you know, the timestamp, and then we're passing in our output text. Now this time around, we're passing our output text in blocks. So that's why we're using blocks. Blocks is just making sure that it has that markdown field. It is, you know, cleaner, and that's why we're passing in a block. We're sending a block, and you pass your handler, your Slack request handler, and that's what we're using in our server.py for our Slack event handler. So if you can go back to our Slack event handler right there. That is basically using our Slack handler right here. So await handler.handle request. So basically, that's how this application is put together. Like I said, I've put everything inside the GitHub repo so you can run this. You just need to have a Salesforce account, a Slack account. You can get a Slack account pretty easily. Like I said, I'm going to put a link in the description on how you can create a quick Slack application, and you can run this. And again, I would like to see what other tools you'd like to add to this. I'm going to be adding more tools to it as time goes on, just for my own testing, but you know, would be curious to see what other tools you add to it and how you sort of modify this for your own organization. Now, if you like these types of videos and you want to see more agents build, more use cases like this built, please let me know. Put them in the chat. I'll be looking forward to reading from you guys. Until next time, do have a great one. Cheers.